So with that said, welcome to episode 2 of the Adaptable Business. We started this thing. We asked the clinical athlete community what we can do to help everybody in this difficult time. And a lot of you guys said that you were small business owners or you were just have been affected by this thing in your business or just in general financially or anything of the like. And so we know that we have a lot of really knowledgeable people in this community, and we thought that getting something like this together would really help people hopefully come up with some strategies to help them stay afloat in the short term, but even more importantly, create some more agile models going forward for the long term. So we had Frank Benedetto on episode 1 a few days ago, and it was a huge success and extremely valuable for people. And we've got Rori Alter here for episode 2, and we're really, really excited. And Rory is going to talk to us about teletherapy, telehealth, whatever you want to call it. This movement that's been going on for a while, but now it's almost become, forced entry almost for everybody, where all of a sudden they're having to shift their model towards this to stay afloat. And Rory's going to help us dissect some of the ins, outs, manage some of the uncertainty, be honest about the questions that still exist in that space. So Rory, thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this stuff.
It's going to be really great. I mean, before we dig in, could you give us and the listeners a little bit of your background, even maybe before the current crisis, what you were doing in the coaching and rehab and teletherapy space, and then kind of where you've transitioned to this point?
Sure. So in 2014, I think that's when I kind of transitioned from working for someone else to working for myself. And I've been competing in powerlifting since about 2012. And as I got more involved in powerlifting, I was just attracting more powerlifters to me by virtue of being a physical therapist who understands powerlifting. And I was being reached out to by people all over the country and the world. So that kind of led me to start doing remote consultations. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't know any of the legalities behind it, but I figured I really literally just dove right in knowing nothing about what was going on. Just figured I might as well jump on Skype, Zoom. Like I think back then I was using Skype, which is not HIPAA compliant, so don't use Skype. And that kind of, it really actually started with Brandon Lilly. Do you guys know who Brandon Lilly is? So he had this like very large injury at the LA Fit Expo. I was following him. Didn't sound like he knew, like his doctors were not like guiding him on the process of how he would ever be able to squat like 900 pounds again. So I reached out to him and we started to work together. And really what I was doing was working alongside him and his physical therapist. So I wasn't providing him physical therapy, but I was providing him more of guidance on how to take what he was doing in physical therapy, but also still get back into lifting simultaneously. So when I left outpatient, I started my own little practice in a gym somewhere that I was just paying space for. And I also started my online coaching business, which also included these like remote rehab consultations. But I never work with someone without having them work with a physical therapist in their state because of the legalities behind everything. So.
And is that still where you would stand now?
Yeah. So I think this is one of the things that I really wanted to talk about today, because the legalities behind teletherapy. So this isn't, so when we hear the word, we have to be really careful with the language that we use, because when we hear telemedicine, that's really talking about like physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs, and all that kind of stuff. Then when we hear telehealth, that will also cover other medical professionals like physical therapy, speech and language, OT, and all those types of rehab professions. So telemedicine, it's not telemedicine, it's telehealth, and under that it's teletherapy. And there's basically with telemedicine or telehealth as a whole, there's a distance site. So the clinician is located in their office or wherever they're located, and the patient is located at a distant site. And the teletherapy means that there's some type of secure video communication through some type of patient portal that you're using. So it's not FaceTime, it's not Skype, it's not instant messenger. It has to be through some type of HIPAA compliant patient portal. So basically you can only provide physical therapy or teletherapy to someone who is in the state that the physical therapist is licensed in. So if someone comes to me and they're in California, I would either say you have to work with a physical therapist in California, and I can help you integrate what you're doing with that person and simultaneously get back to lifting. So it's considered rehab coaching. Or I would refer them to another clinician like Quinn and say, Quinn is in your state. I would suggest working with him. So typically I'll find someone that's in their state who I know can provide them quality care in the manner in which they need it. So you as a clinician have to be licensed in the state that the patient or client is located in. So if you have multiple licenses, that's good. If you don't, then you can only treat in the state that you're in.
A few follow-ups to that. Would you still work potentially, let's say before this crisis, so assuming this person lived in a different state, but perhaps you could still help them, would you say then I need to contact your actual in-person physical therapist, or you need to be seeing an in-person physical therapist concurrently while I am providing you some type of guidance online? And then would you still be calling it teletherapy?
So it's when I'm working with someone out of state who's not related to this crisis, it is who's out of state that I'm not licensed in. It's rehab coaching, and it's very specific, and it's very clear when they sign up that it's not physical therapy. There's like a clear disclaimer that this is not medical advice, and I work with them to find a clinician in their area. So, and that's where the clinical athlete really comes in handy, because usually I default first to the clinical athlete, and I look at like the map and I say, okay, what's your zip code? And I'll go and find someone, and I usually contact that physical therapist and say, this is what we're doing together. For instance, we have someone right now. So I have another physical therapist who works within progressive rehab and strength, and she's licensed in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So we can cover New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. But she's working with someone who had a pec tear in Florida. Now that person's still going to physical therapy in Florida. So the physical therapy aspects of his rehab are being covered by the physical therapist in Florida. And we're just doing his lower body training and like integrating as he phases through his rehab, we're integrating it back into bench pressing. So we do all of his programming, including his upper body.
Would it still then be required to be going through HIPAA compliant platforms then?
So technically not, but as a clinician, and this is where it's kind of really gray waters. And this is why I recommend, if you are within in a compact state. So I don't know if people know what the PT compact is.
There was actually a question about this very thing. So yeah, I'm glad you touched on it.
Yeah. So the PT compact essentially is an agreement amongst certain states that you can it makes it easier to get a license in another state. So basically licensure for physical therapy is on a state by state basis. It's not federal. And the compact, so like in some states you get like an FBI background check and you have to get fingerprinted. And in other states, it's just like you submit like your social security number and get a license. Like in New York, I didn't have to get fingerprinted, but in New Jersey, Alyssa, she had to get fingerprinted, who worked for me. So basically they're making it a standard way to, any state that kind of falls into this standard FBI background check is being kind of, as legislation passes in those states, is being accepted into the compact. And what that means is you don't have to pay as much to get a license. You get a license very, very quickly, like within 48 hours. And all you have to do is take the jurisprudence exam within like a certain time frame. So it makes it much easier. It was really developed for like military spouses because they move very often, and it would take like 6 months to get a license once they move. So they can't work for 6 months just because their husband got stationed somewhere else. So the compact, it's just because you're in a compact state does not mean you can practice in all of the compact states. You have to apply for specific licenses. So like if you're in Arizona, which is a compact state, and you want to work with someone in New York, New York's not compact, sorry, I'm trying to think of another one. Colorado, maybe they're in the compact, I don't know.
Oregon, Washington, I think.
Yeah, one of those like states on that side, not on this side. We're not there yet.
West.
So yeah, so you have to apply. So like you might be licensed in 4 states, even though there's like 20 states in the compact. So it's a good thing though, because for telemedicine, it's going to help us move forward with teletherapy.
Oh, hopefully that answered your question, because that's what he followed up with, was a question about the compact. Now I was prefacing a couple of my previous questions. Well, put the crisis aside for a second. Well, let's stop doing that since we're in the midst of this thing. So whereas before it was, if the person was out of state, I want to make sure that they have an actual PT. I may even contact that PT, but it's very, very clear that their physical therapy is being implemented by somebody who is within their state.
Yeah. So with the crisis, so I don't necessarily think that when I think we have to talk about these two things separately, because with the crisis, it's not about working with people in other states. It's about, you were just in this situation where you work in a practice and you see 10 clients a day, and now you can't see your client. So they're technically, or like, unless you work in New York and live in New Jersey, that's like where these things kind of, if you work in New York and live in New Jersey, though, you probably have a license in New York, so never mind, ignore that. So it comes into play here where we want to start implementing teletherapy, because we can't have our clients come into our practice now. So what's happening is now people who work in outpatient, or basically who work in outpatient, need to somehow continue to work with their clients, right? So I don't think the immediate need right now is not to go out of state and work with someone out of state. The immediate need right now is, how can you continue to serve your clients because they can't come in to see you in the clinic? So it's, how do we start doing or integrating teletherapy into our current practice, treating clients who are in the state that we're practicing in? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And we've got some questions here. Okay. So I think a lot of these HIPAA compliant platforms, okay, I guess we can just kind of dig into those, and I'll throw out a couple that I know of. So I use a platform called PT Everywhere, and it is my EMR, my medical record, my charting software. It's also has a teletherapy platform. So, the actual video, and it's got a home exercise program built in. And somebody else, I think Mike asked about, he uses True Coach, and I use True Coach as well for my training clients. And True Coach is not HIPAA compliant, but it's very robust training platform because that's what it's for. Whereas PT Everywhere's home exercise program is good, like compared to just other cookie cutter physical therapy home exercise programs. It's pretty good, but nothing compared to True Coach, but it is HIPAA compliant. So that's what I use. Rori, any thoughts on HIPAA compliant platforms?
Yeah, so the one that I use is Zoom. And basically you need to have an account with them and then set up a business associate agreement with them. So it's not readily available like on their site to set up HIPAA compliance, but you have to contact them and say like, listen, I am conducting medical services through Zoom, and I need it to be HIPAA compliant. And they have this whole process where they encrypt it and everything like that. And you're really looking for something that doesn't, in the business agreement, they basically say, we are not storing your data. And we don't identify who is on the call with you. So there's no like patient identifier given to Zoom to the third party. So, and I think the two others, I'm familiar with PT Everywhere. And then before we came on this call, I was like really looking for ones that I don't know about, but I couldn't really find any good information on the ones that I was looking at. So the two that I want to give you information on aside from Zoom are doxy.me. So doxy.me, and there is a free version, which I think would be good for anyone who's kind of in this crisis right now, who does plan on going back to their outpatient clinic when this is all done. Doxy.me has a free version, and it's specifically for telemedicine delivery, telehealth delivery. And then you can also, if you have a business G Suite, so a business Google Suite, you can also set up HIPAA compliance through Google in order for your entire Google Suite to be HIPAA compliant. So that's your email communications, your data storage, so your Google Drive. And then there is some video chatting services through G Suite, which I don't use because I use the Zoom communications. So those would be the three that I would say explore now, or PT Everywhere. I just don't know how much that costs, especially if you're planning to go back to your clinic. Then you don't want to spend too much money on this right now. You just want to be able to do this and continue to serve your clients.
There's a couple other ones that I thought of that I've not used. PhysiTrack is one that I've been hearing about. It's relatively inexpensive, and I hear it's got similar functionality as PT Everywhere. Jane app is another one that I had actually looked into several years ago, and it was a lot more basic than it is now. They've really beefed that up. I was actually looking at it a couple of days ago, so those just popped into my head. But Jane
and PhysiTrack are usually integrated these days. We use that at my clinic. That's shut down right now, but yeah.
Oh, so Christy says, yeah, you're right about that. Kevin McNamara says Polycom, perhaps. So these are all in the chat. If people want to look at the chat and start exploring some of these options. But Rori, I had a question about the HIPAA compliance. So I had been in talks with an administrative law attorney about a year and a half ago, and we were discussing all of this, and it was like, it's very gray, and you and I have had these discussions as well. And he looked into the HIPAA compliance piece of it as being a covered versus a non-covered entity. And I won't go into too much of the ins and outs, but essentially what he seemed to suggest was that if you're completely cash, and we'll talk about if you're trying to bill insurance or not, but for my situation, I was 100% cash, completely out of network, not contracted out of network, no contracts, all cash. He said, if that is the case, you are considered a non-covered entity, and HIPAA compliance still applies to you in regards to protecting health information, but all of your platforms don't have to be HIPAA compliant if you are a non-covered entity. What was interesting is he said that if you do decide to go HIPAA compliant with one platform, then all of your platforms have to be HIPAA compliant. It was this kind of all or nothing, like light switch. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. And so I'm completely out of network, self-pay, no contracts with anything. So it is a gray area. And again, the four of us here are not lawyers. So anything that we're telling you today, if you have a practice and you are trying to implement this into your practice, please do your due diligence and check out the APTA website, and also speak to your business lawyer, your medical practice lawyer, your medical malpractice insurance, see what they need, and all those things, because it is so gray and every state is so different. But to my understanding, the HIPAA Act, so HIPAA in general, is specifically when you are connecting with a third-party payer. So I think that what you're saying is correct. I can't 100% say yes or no to that, but that's pretty much my understanding. However, when we are physical therapists, we have licenses, and I think that it's our duty to, regardless of if we're self-cash, out of network, completely out of network, or contracted with insurance companies, or just doing personal training or coaching, because we have this license and we've gone through this whole education process, I personally believe that we have this we should operate up here at the top level and apply those things to everything that we're doing, just for the sake of, okay, so just for the sake of gray areas. And we don't want anyone to ever feel compromised. Even like I implement HIPAA, all the like privacy rules with even just my training clients. So I won't tell anyone that I'm working with that. Like I never share anyone's information on social media. I never put pictures up, testimonials, nothing, unless I have written consent from my clients, regardless of if it's physical therapy or coaching through insurance or not through insurance, regardless of that. And I think that that's our duty as clinicians to apply that on every level. So that's just my personal belief.
Autumn has a question about that as well. She says, do non-telehealth services, i.e. coaching, movement coaching, remote programming, need to be HIPAA compliant when rendered by a physical therapist? She's thinking about being held to our highest license. So if something is to go down, and just because you have a little piece of paper and a waiver that says, oh, this isn't physical therapy,
yeah,
the action can still, are you a physical therapist? Well,
I know.
yes.
So my biller has, and this is, I've been like having this conversation with myself and like my husband sometimes, and even my like business manager, because I get really torn about this, because I am out of network. I am self-pay, self-pay, all that kind of stuff. And then we see these like personal trainers who take like PRI course, and then they're like, I do this and I'm a rehab specialist, and they can do so much more because they don't have a license attached to them, you know? So yes, I think that we do need to keep ourselves at the highest level, and we really do need to abide by that, because, and I have a biller, because we do submit on behalf of our clients who have out of network benefits. We do submit on their behalf. So my biller basically said, you just have to be careful with your personal training or online or any coaching services that you provide, because once a physical therapist, always a physical therapist. If it looks like physical therapy, it is physical therapy. So it's like we almost being out of, like I assume we're all out of the network here. We're in this like weird position. Do we keep our license? I've been questioning, do I keep my license? Like, I'm always going to be a doctor of physical therapy, because the DPT and the PT are two separate things. We have the education, we have the experience, but our license almost kind of dampens our ability to help as many people as we want to help in the ways that we want to help them. You know what I'm saying?
So I totally know what you're saying, because I have these same questions and I've been trying to answer them for many years now. And it's
I don't think we'll ever have an answer.
I think it's, you assume risk. If you're, Rori, you said it, if you have a physical therapy license, you're going to be held to that license. They're not going to just say, ignore that fact. So it's
not like the Good Samaritan law. If you're like certified in CPR and you like break someone's rib, they're like, oh, well, you were trying to help them, so
if something were to go down and somebody said, oh, something bad happened to me because of something that I did that was recommended by this person has a professional license, that's going to be looked at first. And then that person with the professional license is just going to say, no, I had all these safeguards in place. And those might, at the end of the day, by the time it's all said and done, that might be enough.
Right.
But it's still a risk when you step into those boundaries.
Yeah. And even like liability waivers and personal training agreements, these non-compete agreements that you have with all these things, oftentimes they don't hold up in court. You can write them, you can have a lawyer write them, but they're like, listen, in your state, this won't hold up, but we can still we can still write it, have them sign it. Cause oftentimes people are like, well, I signed a waiver, I can't really do anything about it. And they don't know, So it's always good to have these waivers and these legal documents that people are signing. But at the end of the day, if you're doing something that's not consistent with your license or good practice, then that's a risk that you're taking.
And so that, just to follow up real quick with Ashish mentions that, if you go on social media, you're going to see physios giving advice to all people in all countries and all over the world, and says, is it that important to have these legalities? It's important if you feel it's important. Like, nothing matters if nobody is going to take action on anyone, then okay. But it's a risk. It doesn't matter until all of a sudden it matters, and somebody says, oh, I was injured because of this thing that I did from what he said or she said. So,
which is why I really try. I have a very, very strict social media policy in that I rarely post like, this is how you fix this. Like, I don't post like any of those types of things, because you don't want someone to take that piece of information that you put out there, follow it blindly, and then hurt themselves. And it's also why, you want to give it as much help as you can to, so that people want to come to you for help. But at the end of the day, everyone is like so unique, and you can't say like, oh, you have biceps tendonitis. Oh yeah, do this. And then it's cancer in their bone, and then they were doing all these exercises and didn't, go get help. And then it metastasizes, So personally, I have a very strict policy in terms of what kinds of information I am putting out there, because you don't want someone to blindly do something and then blame you for it,
Ryan asks, if you funnel the training services through a different company, AKA set up a separate training entity, would that protect you?
I don't know if it's necessarily that it needs to go through a separate entity. Again, not legal advice here, but what I do is we have very specific services that they're buying, right? So when someone goes to the website, they do the purchase themselves. They click what they're buying, and it says rehab coaching, or it says online coaching, or it says weekly coaching, monthly coaching, or it says physical therapy, initial evaluation. So if it's very clear what they're buying, and then the waivers that they're signing are different associated with that, I don't know if it necessarily has to be two businesses. But at the same time, the company that I used to work for, they do have I believe that they have two businesses. One is like Excel Workout, and the other is Excel Physical Therapy, that I think things are funneled through, but I'm not 100% sure. So again, that would be something that you would want to ask either your accountant or your lawyer.
I want to go back real quick because you mentioned you have a biller. We had a question in the last episode about super billing. Do you ever super bill your patients that you work with, or do you do most of the submission yourself because you have a biller?
So it's interesting. And this really comes down to if we'll get paid in like 2 or 3 visits and how long the person is coming, and if it's going to be like 16 visits before we even see a penny from the insurance company. So we will take their insurance information and we'll verify what their benefits are for out of network. And if it's like January, if it's like December 1st and they have a $6,000 deductible that hasn't been met, and there's no way that in like 4 weeks they're going to meet their deductible. So what we'll do is we'll say it's going to be self-pay, and we'll give you an invoice that you can submit to your insurance. So at least it goes towards your deductible, which won't even help them at that point anyway. But so it's basically, and also because of my business model, so I do one-on-ones in person. I do one-on-one sessions, and they're an hour. And I don't see people for physical therapy unless it's post-op. I don't see people for more than like 5 or 6 sessions, because I'm not in the practice of just like come 3 times a week for the next 12 weeks until you have no visits left. You come, you see me, you get better, you go back to and then you can communicate with me if there's things, so it's not going to be like 12 sessions. It's going to be like maybe 3 or 4 sessions that you're coming to see me. So if the deductible is met, or we'll see payment from the insurance company within like 1 or 2 sessions, we will submit on their behalf. If not, we give them a bill so that they can submit on their own. But for teletherapy purposes, we do not submit for them. So we will give them an invoice for that, or super bill.
A couple quick comments. Sam says MedBridge is developing a platform, a teletherapy platform, if you have a membership with them. So there's that. John says, that their clinic received a fax from a few insurance companies that say Google Hangouts and Skype for Business work for their insurance claims, I guess. Maybe you might have to just check with the insurance company too.
Yeah, so that's what I was saying. So if you have Google for Business and you have the business, so Google, they have like, if you just Google HIPAA, it will show you how to set up HIPAA compliant throughout your entire system. So Google is HIPAA compliant if you set it up to be HIPAA compliant. It's not automatically HIPAA compliant though. And then just quickly in terms of insurance. So let's say you are going into delivering teletherapy services for your clients, given the situation that we're in right now. You need to call your largest, especially if you're in network and you are billing on behalf of your clients, you need to contact, like, I would say start with your like 5 top insurance companies that you see on a regular basis, call them, and you've got to ask them, do you reimburse teletherapy services for physical therapy? If you don't say physical therapy, you're not going to get the right answer. So make sure you're being very specific that it is for physical therapy, and ask them what codes to bill, what codes that they're accepting, and they'll reimburse. So it might, like you obviously can't bill manual therapy for that. And they might need like modifiers. So you want to call your top 5 and get the most information that you can, but you've got to be very specific that you're saying you're calling because your billing want to know if they will cover physical therapy for delivered through teletherapy services.
Well, and what surprised me most about John's comment was that they use Skype, and the insurance company said that Skype works. So
right now, because of the whole COVID-19 thing, they are saying that like FaceTime and Skype are acceptable.
So the HIPAA guidelines are starting to become a little bit more lax to accommodate the crisis.
For right now.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few other really good questions here, but let's say this, because people are probably super overwhelmed if they're not familiar with teletherapy and they weren't doing it before, and all of a sudden they have to do it. So what would be the first step? Like next action item to start to transition into that space?
So, I mean, we have to think of it, is it short-term or is it long-term? So if it's long-term, you want, in addition to all of your standard intake forms that you're using, you want a document, so a waiver that says that they understand that this is teletherapy. This is what we can do. It doesn't substitute, you can't do manual therapy, and also you need to make sure that you have emergency contact information. You want to make sure that you have their nearest hospital phone number, and their address, that you have their current address, where you're seeing them. And you want an emergency contact number. So like their dad or like whoever, in case, like, let's say you're working with someone and they start having a heart attack while they're in the middle of a call with you. You as the clinician are responsible for doing everything that you would do if it was in person. So you want to make sure that it's not just like you call 911. It's like you have to tell 911 where to go. So you need to make sure that you know what their address is, and you want the emergency contact information. Again, like if you're doing like balance exercises and someone falls, you need to know, you got to get them help ASAP. So that I think is like really important. And that can just be on like our teletherapy form, like create a teletherapy form. And then what else? So you want your platform. You want to make sure that the camera that you're using is like high def. So you don't want, and that your internet connection is good. So you don't want it to be like fuzzy and like you can't hear the person. So that would be important. Usually, like if you have an iPhone or like some type of smartphone, like new smartphone, the cameras on there are really good. Just make sure that your phone is set up to be HIPAA compliant, which would be having 2-step verification to get in. So you need a password to get into your phone. or like Face ID or fingerprint or whatever. If you don't have your phone password protected, then you can't use it for teletherapy services. What else? You need to be in a private space. So you can't be sitting in a Starbucks, even though we can't sit in a Starbucks right now, but like my husband wouldn't be in the same room with me while I'm delivering the teletherapy, because that would not be HIPAA compliant. But it's like you as the clinician, the client can be wherever they want to be. You just have to know where they are. Let's see. So I think those would be like the most like important things. And then I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people is going to be like, how do I do an eval? Or like, how do I do manual therapy, I do stim and heat and all those kinds of things, which I actually think that this crisis that we're in right now is really good for our field, to advance our field forward, to realize you don't have to put your hands on people to help them feel better, which is something I think that we all practice here. We're not like hands-on manual therapists anymore. So you have to kind of be creative. Let's say you're evaluating someone for sciatica or low back pain. You want to make sure that you see them from head to toe in the camera, and you can have them do seated slump. You can have them do forward flexion. You can have them do all these different tests that you don't even have to put your hands on for them. You just got to get a little bit creative. So usually what I do is I make sure that I can be seen from head to toe and that they can be seen from head to toe, and I demonstrate everything and then verbally talk them through all the tests that I want them to do. And I go very slow and I say, don't do anything until I tell you to do something. So that's like kind of how you would do the evaluation.
How did you switch? So when this happened, you were still seeing some in-person clients.
Right.
What was then your next step to transitioning them to remote?
So luckily, none of them are physical therapy clients right now. I had just discharged a couple physical therapy clients, and everyone that I was still working with right now, I think there were like 9 clients who were just barbell training clients. So what I did was I offer online coaching. I offer different levels. So I have like monthly coaching, which is the cheapest one, then weekly, which we do check-ins and video reviews every week. And then I have the rehab coaching, which is the highest level. So unfortunately, I really felt that I couldn't I wanted to make sure that they wouldn't not sign up for online coaching. So I offered everyone for this month the monthly coaching, which is $99 to provide them weekly coaching. And thankfully, everyone has gym access in their home. And the one client that didn't have gym access, I gave her a squat rack that I have, a bar. I just like, I couldn't not, I just like, my heart hurt. I was like, I can't not. So I gave her a squat rack or squat stand, a bar, and then a set of plates so that she could train while she's at home. And then one client who has like she doesn't have barbells at home, but she has like a cable machine. She has like tons of I just gave her all my kettlebells. I said, just take my kettlebells and we'll put together a plan with kettlebells for now. So thankfully, I would say 70% of them signed up for the online coaching. So I'm just giving them online coaching right now, letting them text me if they need to, if they have any questions. And then hopefully when all this is over, I get my squat stand back and they come back. I'm sure they will. They've all been with me for a really long time. So thankfully no one was like physical therapy right now when this happened. But
we'll take some of the questions here, and they're good ones, but they're, different topics. We'll try to streamline them. But Jamie asks about flexible spending or HSA funds for teletherapy. Is that something that you would add an addendum on an invoice if you were billing, or would you just say you can submit towards your HSA and hopefully it counts?
I think if they're paying cash, so they usually HSAs have like a debit card, right? So they can usually pay out of their account for the services. They just definitely need an invoice to demonstrate like what that was going to. It can't just be like it can't just be the receipt. They need an invoice usually. I don't know if this is still the case. So I guess this would be another thing, that you need to be able to take online payments because you're not, seeing the person in person. So some of these platforms, like I'm sure PT Everywhere has an online payment processing system, but if you're using, like for me, I use Zoom, IntakeQ, which I think that you can do payments through IntakeQ, but like all the purchasing is done directly on my website. PayPal. So I used to use PayPal, but you couldn't use your HSA on PayPal. Like it was always declined. And I'm not 100% sure why it was that way, but when you use a normal credit card processing system, so we use Stripe, we don't have problems with HSAs now. So they can usually pay with their card if you're using a regular credit card processing system.
Square works as well. I think the problem with PayPal is that like a lot of what would be considered healthcare companies don't really use like a PayPal account. So I don't think like that and Venmo and like Cash App and stuff are probably not something viable.
I wouldn't recommend using Venmo at all for this, because Venmo is really for like friend to friend kind of payments. So if you're in a bind and you're just doing this for like the COVID-19 thing, I would actually say that PayPal probably is the easiest way to go, because if you have a tax ID number, you can set it up to your business. I really do think it's probably the easiest way to go, and there's no monthly fees associated with it or anything like that. One problem I think would be that HSA accounts can't do it. But if that's the case, what I would do then when I was using PayPal back in the day, if someone wanted to submit it to their HSA and get reimbursed from that account, you got to give them an invoice.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, as far as intake, and Mike's got a couple questions about like teletherapy waivers and intake forms. Did you just take those? Are there templates online?
No, I had, I'm trying to think. So my biller gave me a couple. My biller gave me, like, however you would set up your forms, like the language for your forms in person, that would be the same language, because you still need like like your privacy policy, whatever your intake process is, name, age, date of birth, address, like insurance, all those kinds of things. You just need a secure way to get it. Again, you can do all of this through Google, but I'm not sure how the only thing is I don't know how they would like sign on Google, because I think that they would just use like Google Forms or something. I don't know if you can like sign. You might be able to. Google is always updating their features, so there might be like a sign feature now. But we use IntakeQ, which I really, really like. It's like $50 a month. And you can input any of your own forms into there. And they get a unique, it goes straight to their email. They get a unique password every time that they get a new form. So like, it's not like anyone else can get into their form. Again, like IntakeQ is HIPAA compliant. And they can manage their it's like the whole appointment scheduling thing. They can manage their appointments. You can take notes in there. You can keep your notes in there. You can anything. So, and you can put all of your outcome measures on there as well. So like our DASH, hip osteoarthritis, whatever, HOOS and the COOS. And like, we've got all of those on there, and it scores them for us as well. So it just takes a little time to put all them in. And you can also IntakeQ, like I have like the pelvic floor impact questionnaire, which is like a very complicated scoring one. So you can pay like $9 and IntakeQ will do it for you. So that's what I would recommend, is like find a system that will generate these forms for you.
Question about that, because IntakeQ, so that's all electronic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can input the outcome questionnaire and they can take it electronically, as opposed to, like you just upload a PDF and then they have to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to make it as easy, especially if this is not like they didn't voluntarily choose to go into teletherapy, your clients. They were coming to see you. You want to make this as easy as possible for them. So if they had to like print out a form, fill it out, scan it, send it back, like it's too complicated for them. You want to make it as easy as possible. So definitely finding a way that you can deliver your intake forms electronically so that it's smooth sailing for your on the client end.
Quinn, you mind if I jump in real quick and combine two questions here?
No, please.
So the two I want to put together, there's one is, what is the conversation you're having with patients who want hands-on treatment and do not see the benefit or difference between teletherapy and online programming? And then the second one is there a need to reduce the fee of virtual sessions compared to a face-to-face session? And I think those two are related because we're really talking about value here and their assessment of the value of what you're bringing. So Rori, what are you doing in these circumstances? And do you think you have to actually change the price because it's online?
So I actually just gave a lecture on this, Tuesday night. What is, I don't even know what day it is, guys. So
it's Thursday.
Tuesday, 2 days ago. And basically what we have to, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier when we said, I think that this is really an important, stepping stone for our profession, is that my belief is that we need to, as physical therapists, instill autonomy in our clients, right? They shouldn't rely on us to feel good all the time. And I think anyone, especially Jared, like you're the pain science guy here with like your fantastic course that my husband just signed up for. Community, don't forget the code community. Is it still free right now?
The best plug we've had so far.
Community, use the word community. You can get Jared's pain science course. Is that and my philosophy is treat the issue, not the tissue. And why do manual therapies and soft tissue therapies, why are people so reliant on them? And why do people gravitate towards them to feel better, right? It's not really addressing the underlying cause as to why your tissue might be injured or why you're experiencing pain. So I think that it's really important for us to have this conversation with our clients now and the profession as a whole, so that we're not constantly like relying on, we're not, but like manual manipulation or Graston or ART. Like I used to be I know I'm no longer. I used to be full body certified in ART, and I stopped because I don't want someone coming to me just for ART. That's not what's going to make you better. What's going to make you better is figuring out the underlying cause and addressing it, and then understanding why you are experiencing pain, what happened leading up to it, and how we can move forward so that you're no longer experiencing pain when you're doing that thing, right? So it's not, my hands on you is not going to fix why you're experiencing pain. So I think we have to have that conversation with our clients to say, listen, this is actually going to be better for you because you're going to be able to take what we're doing virtually when we're not touching each other and apply it going forward so that you don't need me to feel better, which isn't always the best business model. But
so the way that I see this, and I agree, and I think Kushbu had the same question, like if they have a certain split in their clinic for in-person clients, what's now the split for like their clinic to how much they get paid? Now what's the split for virtual? If the time commitment is the same, you should value your time the same. Your expertise is the same. You value your expertise. You don't pay your financial advisor a certain amount of money or more money for him to actually go in and make the transfers for you manually through your bank accounts. Like we are providing our hard-earned expertise that is of a value, and it shouldn't be devalued just because we're giving that.
So the only thing, and I think this is where we have to look at it separately, like what's happening right now versus are you making this like your long-term business plan? Because yes, 100% what is our value, right? But at the same time, a brick and mortar business has a lot of overhead. And part of the dollar amount that goes into paying for each hour that we're working with someone is to keep the lights on and to pay the electric and the air conditioning and to pay the front desk staff and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think that we have to look at it just slightly differently. And also, if you're doing online, what does the online delivery process look like? Are you still doing 3 sessions per week with someone, if that's what it was? Or are you doing one evaluation or once a week and then communicating via email? Are you providing them a program and they're, sending check-ins? So like, how are you delivering it, right? And what are your overhead costs? So I think that long-term, so I'm going to be like very transparent about my in-person versus my remote rehab coaching prices. So I don't do it on a week-to-week basis for online rehab coaching. I do it in 4-week installments. So the first month is $5.99, and then every month thereafter is $4.50. And what they get with that is they get a one hour initial evaluation, and then they get check-ins via email every session after that. Again, this is not teletherapy. This is remote rehab consultations, right? So it's not like I'm getting on a call with them. I'm not going through exercises every single session 3 times per week. What it is I lay out the plan and I adjust the plan based on essentially they're like considered e-visits. And an e-visit is a non-telecommunication visit. So that's like email, text message, whatnot. So through a portal, right? So if this is your long-term plan, you have to look at it that way. And I would actually think that it's more cost-effective for the client, especially if you're out of network, for them to do it that way, versus if they came twice a week for $150 a session. So that's $1,200 a month, right? So $1,200 because you're not spending that 1 hour with them twice a week. So I think that's just my personal opinion. However, if we look at it in a bubble for COVID-19, the practice still exists. You still have your rent. You still have you still have all of your expenses. You might still be paying some of your administrative staff to like put all this together to communicate with clients. So it's a little bit different. And if you're doing the one-on-one sessions and you still have your brick and mortar, then I think that would change the pricing structure for the online in the bubble of COVID-19 versus long-term business plan.
It's almost like 2 different conversations, because on the one hand, what you're suggesting is that teletherapy allows you to become much more flexible and creative with models, and then you can manipulate the pricing structure for more of a win-win for you and the client. I think some of these questions get at is our service valued now that it has to be through a video medium? And I think that's the point that I want to hit on, is the answer should be no. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that we have to kind of think of it as, and this is what I said, I did this for my clients where I would normally charge so normally for a 4-week weekly program, I would charge $239. But because this is an inconvenience for my clients who come to see me regularly in person, and I still want, and again, this is like within the bubble of COVID-19, right? I offered them for this particular period in time, for this 4-week period. I don't know what I'm going to do after that. I offered them the $99 program because they didn't ask for this. None of us asked for this. And I think that we have to be just a little bit flexible to make sure that everyone is happy and stays consistent. Like the last thing we want is for a client to be like, you know what, you're not putting again, like this is a conversation we have to have, but the last thing we want is for a client to be like, well, you're not putting your hands on me. I'm not getting my stim. I'm not getting my ultrasound. So I'm not going to do this. Like, forget it. So I think maybe we have to bring it down. So I recommend everyone join the Teletherapy physical therapy. What is it called? Hold on, I have it up. There's a lot of conversations going on about like how they're pricing how they're structuring their prices. So the Facebook group is called Telehealth Physical Therapy Providers, and then in parentheses it says PT Physio. And the guy who runs it, his name is Rob Vining. There's so much information in there, but there's a lot of conversations on how people are pricing it. And I think that people are like lowering copays or like waiving copays or just taking like 20% off the price of the visit, again, because the clients didn't ask for this. And I understand as business owners, we didn't ask for this either, but want to make sure that no one is turned away because they're like, well, I'm not coming to your office and you're not putting your hands on me. Yeah, we should have that conversation. You don't need hands-on work all the time. But I think that, again, goes to the conversation of what do we do going forward with our profession? And I think all of us here have that conversation. I might do manual therapy today in the first 2 sessions, but this is not something that we consistently do going forward, kind of thing. So I don't know if I would keep the prices the same.
I think I'm coming at it more from an existential conversation versus the actual monetary number that we're talking about. Because I've done the same thing. I've offered people different deals and stuff like that. But it's like the conversation is we're all in this together. There's still a value to our expertise. So the value of, and I don't just mean the monetary value. I mean just the existential value of what we provide. And we all know that, we're in this together, but we shouldn't think long-term, because now if I can't do some type of manual therapy interventions or practice the way that I used to, then I'm somehow less of a therapist. And I think that's the point that I
definitely not less of a therapist. And again, like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't lower prices just because you can't provide a service that you used to provide, but again, like, I think, yes, you're not providing less of a service in any capacity, but I think given the situation, we have to say, like, okay, let's just make sure we see our clients somehow. But anyone who is a manual therapist in who's watching this right now or in the recording or whatever, if this is something that we're stuck with for the next 3 months, you're not less of a physical therapist or chiropractor or whatever. I don't know. I guess an acupuncturist can't do teletherapy, but forget acupuncture. Just know that this is good, because you as a clinician will realize that you can still provide premier care to your clients without touching them.
Well, I think it's kind of important. You mentioned earlier going through an evaluation and walking someone through a slump test. When's the last time you actually had to communicate so effectively that you walked someone who had no idea what they were doing through a special test? That there's a depth of understanding and expertise that is necessary to be able to do what a lot of us are going to try to do over the next few weeks to transition to this platform. Now, people on your screen right now, we've all been doing this for a while in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through coaching or rehab or something like that. But it challenged my skill set exponentially when I first decided to, hey, let me just start trying to coach people online out of necessity, because I had people move away. And now all of a sudden I'm trying to verbally talk someone through pulling off a clean and jerk. And you're like, wait, whoa, this is way different. So I think it is. It's going to force a lot of us to evolve and really dig into our expertise. And I think that's where, we need to help people right now. We need to make sure that they're still staying active and being healthy and making the right choices. And there's a lot of opportunity in regards to that. But I also want to kind of echo what Quinn is saying, walking somebody through a slump test there's value there. And when the dust settles and everything clears, we need to understand that the value that you provide online is the same as you can do with your hands. And in some instances, I would say probably more, just because of the challenge that's involved. So
Mike's got a good question here. He says he's got 3 clinics and 10 practitioners, and to just kind of get the ball rolling with his current patients and to kind of keep them in the community, he asks, would a first-time complimentary teletherapy session be a good idea, just to get them accustomed to what this is going to be like, maybe create some value and just to kind of get the ball rolling?
I think that's a great idea. We, in general, on our website, we offer free consultations. So and I think that that's a really great transition, because you have the opportunity to have so much of an impact in that first visit and show them, wow them in their first session. Maybe have your 10 practitioners practice, do some case studies, before they start doing the the free consultations or whatever, so that they feel confident going into them. But I think that's a really great way to just show them that, like, listen, you can still do this. It's easy. We'll walk you through the whole process. We're with you. Even though we're not with you, we're with you there, holding your hand every step of the way, kind of thing. And so I think that's a really good idea.
Is your free complimentary, that first one, is that the same length of time?
No. So we schedule them for 30 minutes, but we don't really put a cap on them. But we do have like a buffer on our schedule so that if a 30, like, we don't get like 4 booked back to back. But usually I would say we'll probably be on there for like 45 minutes. And then that gives us a lot of information. And also use your client's language. So don't use your own language, especially when you're doing these free ones. Like, really listen to what they're saying and repeat what they're saying, repeat their fears, repeat their hesitations and their objections, and say, okay, I understand that you feel this way, but I want to let you know that this is how we can overcome that, kind of thing. So really listen to what they're saying in that free consultation and overcome their objections. Use their language and not your language, in order to make that transition easier for them.
Do you, so I know that most of your clients were coaching, and now currently all of them that you said earlier, if you start getting some physical therapy, in-state physical therapy.
Yeah. So I actually, after this, I have a teletherapy consultation for someone with sciatica. So. Okay.
Yeah. So then my next was to talk a little bit about the insurance piece. So are you going to be doing the billing then?
No. So for my and this is just the way that my practice is set up, because I've been doing these 2 things for so long. I am not doing the billing for them. So this is where I will be providing the person with an invoice that they can submit on their own. And I will do that after we've completed so he purchased, and this is something like, again, like, I'm bending for the current situation. So normally we don't let people sign up for 2 weeks when they first sign up. We do the 4 weeks and, like, this is what you got to do. But because of who knows how long this is going to be happening, he might be able to come see me in 2 weeks. Like, I don't know. So I gave him like a 2-week option. So I don't give them the super bill until we've completed the rehab coaching, or well, this is actually teletherapy because he's in New York. So I won't give them the bill until we've completed it, because basically the amount that they're paying covers a period of time. So I give it to them at the end. Okay. Now, if you are using teletherapy to supplement your inpatient, your outpatient clinic, then before you get on these calls, you have to call the insurance companies and ask, like, call Blue Cross Blue Shield and say, this is, what are you reimbursing for physical therapy in terms of delivering it through teletherapy? What are the codes that I can bill? Are there modifiers that need to be used? Can you direct me to the resource online so I can read it myself? And then know those before you go in. Now, if you're finding that, and again, you also have to know what your Practice Act says about it. So make sure that you're going to read your Practice Act first, so that you know, can you provide teletherapy in your state? If the rule of thumb is, if there's no language on it, then it's probably okay. Now, then there might be specific language, which gives you a little bit more specific, like, guidelines for it. But to my understanding, again, not legal advice, speak to your lawyers, but to my understanding, if there's nothing in your Practice Act, then your state is silent on teletherapy, and that's better, because you can probably do it. So always call the insurance company first. Now, if you're finding that, like I said before, your top 5 insurance companies, call them. And if you're finding that they're not reimbursing for teletherapy, then you need to have a conversation with your clients and say, it's going to be self-pay, and I will give you an invoice when we're done, and you can still try to submit this to your insurance company, but you have to make sure that it has the right code. I think outpatient office an office visit is 11, and a teletherapy service at a distance site is 2. So make sure that you're not please, guys, don't like do insurance fraud here and put like a code that was in office so that it gets reimbursed.
Okay, so that's good. I want to summarize what you said there because there's layers to this, and this is where people get messed up. Because right now what you're saying is, right, all of your teletherapy clients, at least for the time being, you're not going to be pre kind of looking into their benefits. It's going to be, here's an invoice. We'll provide you with the information that you would need. It's your responsibility to submit. You're not going through your billing company right now for those.
No, because I don't do that for my teletherapy services anyway.
Okay. So, but let's say that you decided this crisis was going to be more long-term. We've learned in the coming weeks, and you've decided that you are going to shift that way. Or if some of the people who are listening do want to do that, what you're saying is the first thing you got to do.
Call the insurance company.
Well, even before that. Practice Act. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what insurance company says. If the state board says no teletherapy, then it's no teletherapy. Then if state board either says, yeah, this is cool, where most of them don't say a thing because the board practice acts are old, they say, okay, I'm just going to move forward. Now step is call insurance company. If insurance company says, yeah, great, you can do all this stuff. If they say no, then you say, okay, I'll give you an invoice that you can still submit, but this is what the insurance company says.
Right. And you have to be, and this is where that teletherapy waiver comes in handy. So, and I don't know if people who bill out, maybe, I mean, I don't work in network, within network at all. So I don't give information on like what their insurance will cover, but typically I deliver that information via a phone call or via email. And I say, we verified your insurance. You get your deductible is this much has been met. This is how many visits you get. This is how many visits it will be until your insurance kicks in. So for the first 3 visits, you're responsible for $150, well, whatever the eval is, then $150 per session. And then you're responsible for your co-insurance after these number of visits, and it'll be X, Y, and Z, and we'll submit on your behalf, right? So that's for in-person. Now, this is like, you've got to make sure that you're very, very clear with your clients that, okay, we verified your insurance, and this is where you might want to have like a written document that you send to them and that maybe they sign it and send it back to you. Okay, we verified your insurance. Your insurance will not cover teletherapy services, but we will, and so they understand. So I understand that my insurance does not cover teletherapy services, and I'm responsible for paying for the entirety of this blah, blah, blah at this rate for blah, blah, blah. And then you give them an invoice that they can try to submit on their own. So you just want to make it sure that you have it in writing, that they understand it's not covered, or this is what's covered, and this is what we're doing.
If somebody's looking to find an attorney to consult with in regards to these types of things, what type of attorney should they be seeking?
A medical practice attorney. So an attorney who works with medical professionals.
You can go into more generically like administrative law and see then if you can subset. Is that accurate or not quite?
Not 100% sure. Now, I do think that billers, so my biller usually has dealt with all of these things at other practices. So billers usually kind of know this stuff because they've dealt with it in many capacities. So you can first maybe speak to your biller, and then try. I used a medical practice. I think that's what they're called. I don't know, my dad, he's got all these connections. He's like, they deal with doctors and they have a telemedicine kind of component. But yeah, so I would just say business law, and then maybe subset would be medical. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's administrative law is kind of like attorneys that deal with professionals who have overseeing boards. And there's a lot of those professions that have nothing to do with healthcare, but within that, healthcare is one of them. And then you can kind of try to dig down deeper to what Rori is saying too.
At the end of the day, I just think that even if you have a lawyer, it's still so gray. Like I have a couple of lawyers that I work with. One is, I don't even know, like he did all my he did all of my like personal training agreements. And then in his practice, he had someone who worked with telemedicine. So I spoke with her, and then I got another lawyer who was a business lawyer, but dealt with medical practices. And then like, no one ever has like I'm telling you, when it comes to the law, there is no yes or no. I mean, there's usually a yes or no, but it's so unclear regardless of what the law says. It's like always unclear. So
we got a question about Medicare above. John, you mentioned, or I think you clicked it, you would touch on that too. But Rory, do you have,
I clicked to answer it a little bit earlier because it would have segued in well, but now is a good time too.
Yeah.
Well, either one of you guys, if you work with clients who have Medicare, how do you manage that?
So I don't. And actually, this is something that I wanted to talk about, like even before we started. So to work with Medicare clients, you have to be a Medicare approved provider. So there's a whole application that you have to go through in order to actually accept Medicare and submit to Medicare. So, I believe that you can be in network and out of network. So you can be a Medicare approved provider out of network. So I would recommend, if you just in general, if you're thinking of opening your own practice, I would recommend being out of network because you're going to make more money if you're out of network. And then second, for Medicare, staying out of network with Medicare, but being a Medicare approved provider. It's not going to make you as much money as all the private insurances, but at least you can make a little bit more money that way than if you were in network. In terms of, let me just go back to the question. Where did it go?
It's in the answered questions.
Oh, got it. I was like, where'd it go? Where did it go?
It's Tyson.
So they actually just, I believe, I actually think I have a link for this. Hold on one second, guys.
Now, can the Medicare patient opt out if they want to pay just cash services?
So I believe that the legalities behind that are no. You can't, if someone has Medicare, you can't take, my biller always says they're Medicare, you can't treat them unless you're accepting Medicare. So you have to accept whatever their insurance pays. You can only take their copay. And I do that on I've done that on like a case-by-case basis, because I had a client who was doing personal training with me and then came back and he wanted to do physical therapy and he had a Medicare plan. And I wasn't going to be like, sorry, I can't treat you, so I made an exception for his plan. And I think maybe I got like somewhere between like $100 and $110 per visit for him, which isn't what we charge, but it is what it is. But here, I do have this thing. So Medicare telemedicine healthcare provider fact sheet. So this came out on March 17th. I'm actually just going to put this in the comments so people can. So they basically expanded telemedicine so that now Medicare you are able to do telemedicine and telehealth through Medicare, but read that link that I just put in there, because there's a very distinct difference between, what are the words that they used? Between teletherapy, e-visits, and virtual check-ins. And so teletherapy and telemedicine was not covered by Medicare until now. And the client has to be an existing client in order for you to do these e-visits. So they're not evaluations, it's not teletherapy, and it's billed differently. So make sure you check out that link for more of the specifics on how to work with a Medicare patient right now through virtual means.
John, did you have anything to add to that on the Medicare side?
No, I know it just got approved for telemedicine. It's always been kind of sticky with Medicare. When I was in clinic, we were in I wouldn't say primarily, but a good amount of Medicare. And there are quite a few restrictions, but I think when it comes to teletherapy, everything is brand new with that whole realm. So the resource she put up, I reposted it to the entire attendees group. Is a good read. I've been through that already. I suggest reading through that thoroughly, probably a couple times before you take on a Medicare patient.
Yeah, the only like workaround that I've seen in the past is calling it fitness and wellness service instead of physical therapy. But again, now we're into the same conversation where
if you're doing an evaluation and they're coming to you like they have back pain, you know, you have to be careful. And that is just in general when you're talking about like your general practice. If you are doing like personal training or wellness with someone, and then as a physical therapist, they also say, you know what, today my back really hurts. And what I do is I literally book it as a physical therapy session and charge them for physical therapy. Like I make it very clear in like what they're signing in for, what their appointment says, what their receipt says, and what so that it's not, you're not assessing their back pain in a personal training session. You're assessing their back pain in a physical therapy evaluation. Again, because if we're doing these two things, we have to be really careful. We are always a physical therapist. So we want to treat anything that's related to the scope of physical therapy as physical therapy.
So you pretend you didn't hear them say that? You just...
Sorry, you broke up. I didn't hear what you said.
I said, so you can't just pretend that you didn't hear them when they say that?
I mean, sometimes I try, I don't know, you know. And listen, if it's like, you know, like my knee hurts a little bit, I'm like, well, like.
Mine too.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, let's just try and train and see what happens. And then they forget about it. Then I'm like, I don't worry about it. But then if it's something that they've complained about 3 or 4 sessions in a row, I say, okay, like maybe we should take a look at it, you know, through a physical therapy evaluation.
And maybe to wrap up, for some of the people thinking about all these nuances, and it's like, all the people that I see on social media really take all of these steps? And it doesn't matter. Like it's whether you want to take these steps, and for you and your business and your clients. And just because other people may not, doesn't mean that's the right thing to do, or that doesn't mean that if shit were to ever hit the fan, had they wished that they had taken steps to be more responsible with this stuff. So I think this has been really, really insightful, Rori. Go if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, there. I just wanted to say, so I read a really great article. Actually, I'm forgetting his last name right now. So let me just tell you what his last name is. He might actually be a clinical athlete. I'm not 100% sure. Nick Licamelli. Have you heard of him?
Yeah,
he works with 3DMJ. He put a really great article out about this specific topic last night, which I was like, oh, this is brilliant. I read it. It was so good. I messaged him. I was like, oh, thank you. And he basically, what he's saying is like, listen, this is something that takes time to implement. I didn't just wake up one day and open my virtual practice, you know? So when for people who are in they practice in an outpatient clinic and they've never done teletherapy before, and now you can't see your patients and you're trying to connect with them, you're trying to scramble to put it all together right now. My recommendation is to just take deep breaths and just try and get things kind of in place before you start seeing your clients virtually, so that the experience that your clients have is good, the experience that you have is good, and then nothing negative comes of this. So really just take your time, try and, you know, go into this teletherapy Facebook group that's run by Rob Vining. There's incredible resources in there, and in their what is it called? In their files section, they've put in so many things over the last couple of days that can help people start their practices, take their practices online. But just don't rush. Make sure you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and checking, make a checklist and make sure you're going through all of these things so that you are covering your ass, you're keeping your clients happy, no one gets hurt, and you're smooth sailing. So this is something that takes even in that Rob Vining has this like Teletherapy kind of kickoff program that's like a 6-week process to set up your online, which is fast, to set up your online teletherapy services. And people are trying to do this like overnight now. So just slow down, take a couple deep breaths. Like hopefully no one dies. No one's going to die. Just take a couple deep breaths, get your system in place. And then, do it slowly. Don't try and do like 15 in a day. Do like 1 or 2. And then the next day, like just make sure that you're going through this process slowly and carefully so that everything is kosher, as kosher as possible.
I think that's a great cap on it. If people ask, well, what are the next steps? Well, watch the recording, because Rori touched on a lot of the next action items and a lot of the things that you're going to want to put on that checklist. So when you get this thing, watch it again, and then head over to that Facebook group. Thanks so much for that reference too. We're actually going to have Nick on here doing one of these too. We've already talked to him. So
he mentioned, he said you guys had reached out. Of course, you know him. I was like falling asleep when I messaged it because I read it right before I went to bed and I sent him a message and then I fell asleep. So.
Any parting thoughts? I think you touched on all the questions that I had, and looks like we're covered everything. We're all
awesome. Going to be okay, and we're in this together.
Yeah. If we pull if we pull resources, and we shouldn't be now, like you said, I think this can be a positive for our profession when we start really working together, and some of those competitive lines start to get blurred, because we know like, oh shit, if I don't get help, I'm going to be in trouble. And like the help is going to come from your colleagues as much as it's going to come from the patients that are actually, supporting your business and you. So thanks so much for doing this, Rori. This has been awesome.
Of course.
Yeah,
thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Where can people connect with you more?
You can connect with me on Instagram, Rori, RORIMEGAN_PRS, or on my business, which is at Pro Rehab Strength, or you can visit my website, progressiverehabandstrength.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. John, Jared, thanks so much for helping to manage the questions and joining in as well.
Thank you, Rori.
We will send the recording out ASAP, and we'll talk to you all soon. John, Jared, give a thumbs up. Rori gave hers. Oh, okay, cool. Hey.
It was obscured.
Okay, bye. Yay.